The following is a special presentation on TNN, the Nashville Network.
Gentlemen, start your engines.
Speedway plays host to the Buckeye 300, presented by Nationwide, as the American Speed Association kicks off its 1995 racing season. Hello again, everybody, and welcome as we kick off what we expect is going to be even better than last year. I'm Brian Drever, and I'll be working with Rob Albright as always this year, and we're looking forward, as we have for probably 6 months now, to the very first racing of the very first race of this season. We'll be talking a little bit about the championship and the contenders, the guys who are going to be racing for the crown a little bit later on in the show. And joining me, as I said, is Rob Albright, with whom it's always a pleasure to work. Rob?
You too, Brian. And we may have a little trouble for the next couple of minutes getting our mouths to work. It is cold here in Columbus, Ohio. It's been boring status quo for a number of drivers, but some really exciting changes for others. Get a piece of paper and a pencil, and we're going to chart some changes in just a couple of minutes. Well, talking about the diaper dandies of 1995 is our cohort Ricochet, Ralph Shaheen.
Ron, thanks a lot. You know, 14 drivers have made their way here to the Buckeye 300 presented by Nationwide for one particular reason. They wanted one of these. It's called a rookie stripe. We have 14 rookies going for the Pat Shire Memorial Rookie of the Year Award, and we'll take a look at this year's rookie class a little later on.
We'll be back with a lot more as we get ready to start this very first race of an exciting new season. Stay with us. The 1995 AC-Delco Challenge Series on TNN is brought to you in part by Win Oil Company, makers of quality automotive car care products. Remember, when it's wins, it works. By your GM Goodwrench service dealer, we want your business. By Nationwide Auto Parts, the best brands in these parts. And by Schlage Locks, the Doberman of locks. Welcome back, everybody, as we get set to start this very first race of America's premier short track racing series, the American Speed Association and the AC-Delco Challenge Series. I'm Brian Drebber, Rob Albright here. You'll be seeing a lot of Ralph Shaheen throughout this broadcast. And Rob, you already mentioned before about how things stayed the same for a lot of drivers and a lot of teams over the course of the winter, but, well, things have changed. We see a lot of new cars, a lot of new drivers filling up the seats. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, for the old dogs like Mike Eddy and Bob Seneker, the same as last year. They run their own operations and very few things have changed. But for several other drivers, they find themselves with, in some cases, new paint jobs. In other cases, with brand new teams. Look at this car. It was black and orange last year. Todd Forbes now with a new paint job, new sponsorship from the Maisto Die-Cast Toy Company. And he's looking to make a good impression for this sponsor. Scott Hansen, the well-traveled one, started with the Gunderman team last year, ran his own team the second half of the season, now back with Gunderman, and he's a real championship contender. Won the opening All-Pro race this year. There's Steve Holzhausen. Only the number remains the same. He goes from Pontiac and then Chevy now to Ford, and this is the team that Scott Hansen had as his own last year. Jay Sauter, his future is really uncertain. This Steve Mergic car of last year, just a couple of times, and Jay is hoping that with some good performances the first 2 or 3 races, he can make it stick. Glenn Allen, a new sponsor, Eaglewood Construction. That car is hot pink, fuchsia if you prefer, with a blue number. He says it better be fast with all that pink on it. Tony Raines now gets into the car vacated by Steve Holzhausen. That's the Baker Motorsports car, and he now has an opportunity to shine. This car won 2 races with Holzhausen last year. Ken Stauber doesn't look a whole lot different, just the number has changed. It's 98, it was 90, but he's built a brand new race car that we hope to see at Toledo, a track on which he has won several championships. Jeff Neal, probably the prettiest new paint job and new sponsorship from Pyroyal Oil. It's a division of Valvoline. They've gotten into our series big time, and Jeff had a great qualifying run.
So those are some of the new look race cars. We also have a field full of rookie drivers. Now, the rookie battle last year, of course, Rob, was one that I think that'll go down in history as the best ever. But this year, we have got a lot of people that are going to be racing for that rookie battle. It
was really fun going to the drivers' meeting today because it wasn't Brian Refner and Dave Sensiba sitting there on the edges of their chairs hanging on the words of Rex and Brian Robbins. It was 14 other faces. And I don't know, you could see enthusiasm, but you could see fear and consternation to a certain degree. I mean, these guys know this is the best short track racing in the country. And with an unusual qualifying format here, it was a tough chore for them to just make the race. A lot of the drivers didn't even make it. $50,000 up for grabs. Ralph, who are the leading candidates?
Well, you know, Rod, like you said, $50,000 up for grabs. That's a lot of money. 2 of them have joined me down here right now. I have Ted Smokestad on one side of me here, the Super America driver, and Eddie Sharp over here on the other side of us now. $50,000, Eddie. That's a lot of money. That'd pay for a good chunk of the bills to go racing in ASA. Is that enough? Is that what this is all about?
Well, certainly it's about paying your bills, no doubt about it, but it's more than that to me. It's about winning. It's not the actual dollar amount, but it sure is nice icing on the cake.
Well, you know, Ted, when there's $50,000 up for grab, everybody runs pretty hard, and we've seen already in the early races here today that the enthusiasm of the rookie class is pretty aggressive. You think that is going to be the style all season long?
Well, I think a lot of that aggressiveness just comes from being the first race of the year, Ralph. It's going to be a great rookie battle all year long. I mean, with Eddie and Brett and everybody else, it's just going to be a great rookie battle, and I'm looking forward to it with Super America on board with us, where I think we'll have the financing to do what it takes to be at every event. And, you know, if it just so happens we don't win the Rookie of the Year, it's going to be disappointing, of course, but we're just looking at this as just a great time to come out and race with these guys with the ASA and AC-Delco and everything, so we're really looking forward to the year.
Do you think that the battle we saw last year, as tight as it was with 14 drivers this year, do you think we'll still see that tight of a battle, or will it spread out somewhere?
I have to imagine getting halfway, 2/3 of the way through the season, that'll tell a story, but I have to imagine that there's going to be 3 or 4 teams there, at least through the halfway points, that it could go as many as 3 or 4 ways.
Well, you know, as we get this thing started, guys are walking up all over the place. So I'm going to stick back here and grab Rick Beebe, we saw walk up here. Another one of the guys is going for Rookie of the Year. What do you think? 14 drivers, $50,000. We saw a real tight battle last year. Are you up to the task?
Well, I hope so. We started off bad here. We just had a decent run in our qualifying race and cut the right side out of a tire. I think we got up to 6th or 7th and had a decent starting position for this race. And like 6 laps to go, we cut the sidewall of a tire and fell out, and we're not going to be in the race.
Well, that's it, gentlemen. 14 drivers, $50,000. They come from all over. We've got former boat racers. We've got former road racers. We've got everything. And they've all come to the best short track series in the country to try their wares, see if they can lay claim to the Pat Schauer Rookie of the Year award and that $50,000 paycheck.
Well, we have seen who some of the new look drivers are. We have talked about the new drivers. In a little while, we'll look at the championship battle, and we'll be right back to the Buckeye 300 presented by Nationwide right after this. Hello again, everybody. As we get set to start this Buckeye 300 presented by Nationwide, we have a lot of things to talk about. And before the race gets started, one thing we should tell you is that the feature event is going to be 200 laps. We had a pair of 50-lap qualifiers, so altogether that makes up the Buckeye 300. Now, we have talked about last season and about the championship run by Butch Miller, who is not with us here for this very first race. When we do talk about championship contenders, there are a whole handful of guys out there who we think can run for this $3.3 million at stake in the American Speed Association AC-Delco Challenge Series. Just who are the ones who will be the front runners for the big payday at the end of the season? Well, we've made a few predictions. Any conversation about championship contenders starts and ends with Mike Eddy in the number 88 Goodwrench Pontiac, whose 7 championships have been the result of things done in a tried, true, and proven manner.
I'm kind of set in my ways. I do everything the same all the time, and it seems to work out, so I've really found no reason to change.
Mike Eddy's 7 titles rank number 1, but number 1 in race victories is the Bluebird, number 84 Bob Seneker, who drove into victory lane late last year after a long drought.
It seems like winning races now and getting close to the championship means more now than it did when I was 30 or 40. Just because I'm probably nearing the end here, and it'd be nice to pick one off before I quit on it, and this might be the year.
Throw away the first half dozen races last year, and the championship would have gone to the youngest driver ever to win an ASA race. Glenn Allen Jr. capped off a late-season charge with a win in the last one.
We've been so close. I want to win the championship, and if I can beat the guys of Bob Seneker, Mike Eddy, the big key for us in 1995 is Lady Luck. I don't see why not we can't do it.
Scott Hansen started the season in a Chevy, switched to his own team driving a Ford, and returns to the Gunderman team for a title run. A runner-up, third 4 times in a row, he settled in for a shot at number 1.
I think right now the way Scott Hansen has formed this team back together and sat everybody down and said, we're here for a championship. We're not here to worry about the little things in life anymore. I think we're going to be a definite contender.
Gary St. Amant put the number 7 wins Thunderbird in the top 10 times last year and did just about everything right except win a race. Always focused. This year his motto is focused with a laser beam.
Back in 1990, I pasted little pieces of paper up on my wall. You know, what am I looking forward to most right now? And the one thing I put up on the wall was winning my first ASA race, Columbus Motor Speedway, and we did that. We accomplished that. Later on, went on to win the TNN All-American 400. And this year, I have a couple of pieces of paper pasted on my wall, and it doesn't say anything about first ASA win or anything like that. It's about championship.
1994 was a year of extreme frustration for Tony Raines. One of the most talented young drivers ever to occupy the spot behind the wheel. Problems with equipment plagued him, but with his new team, those worries should be over.
It was tough. It was tough on everybody involved, you know, and we survived, I guess. And this year, I'm really, excited. I'm concerned maybe about the pressure because I think everybody expects me to do good right off the start. But I think it's going to take a little bit to get, adjusted. But I think once we get going, I think we're going to do really good.
Young Brad Loney had his share of misfortune in the Winnebago number 33 last year, but brought his fledgling racing team around and ended up 7th on the year. He is certainly a star on the rise, maybe just a little short on experience.
I'd like to think not. That's definitely our goal for this season. Winning a championship for this team would be something they all deserve, and certainly our sponsors are worthy of that.
Mike Miller, owner, builder, and driver of the number 18 Pontiac, waged a battle with eventual champion Butch Miller for the first half of the season, but got off track and ended up 14th. The wheels may have come off the wagon, but this veteran's enthusiasm is still full on.
Well, we had 3 or 4 failures that were chassis related, and I take full responsibility for that. And then we had some motor trouble, and over the course of the winter now, we've basically addressed the motor problem and addressed the chassis problem. So I'm really pumped up for 95. We should really do good this year.
Well, I made no secret of the fact that my neighbor, Mike Miller, was my personal favorite last year, and he remains so again this year. But, Rob, I'm going to go out on a very short limb and predict that my favorite for an 8th championship is going to be the driver of the black number 88 car, and I want him to win his championship before that other black Goodwrench car driver does.
They call him Mr. Obvious, Mike Eddy. Come on, you can be a little more imaginative than that.
Not today.
The way I look at it, there's a kid that anybody that'll wear a uniform that's hot pink in color has to be my choice. It's hard to imagine that it was 7 years ago when 23-year-old Glenn Allen Jr. came to ASA and had to get help about 2 races into the season from Butch Miller just to keep the car pointed in the right direction. He ended the season strong with a win at Jennerstown. I think he's going to be the titleist in 95.
Well, we're going to have to go down to the 3rd member of our broadcast team, perhaps for the definitive word on who the championship contender is going to be. Ralph, who's your favorite?
It's hard to bet against Mike Eddy. He is definitely going to get his 8th ASA championship. Question is when, and whoever beats him, they're certainly going to have to go through him to lay claim to that title if they want it. One guy who's already making a lot of noise in that direction is Gary St. Amant. Congratulations on the first pole of 1995. Last year, the word for you was focus. What's it this year? Where's your mental game at now?
Well, the word focus is still in our vocabulary, Ralph, but, you know, the big picture is a championship this year. You know, the Winsport City Ford Thunderbird, you know, we're on the pole up here. This race is really important, but with Hooters coming on board and pumping in for the championship is the big picture, and that's what we're after.
Let's talk a little bit about today's race. You've chosen the outside line here, and we've seen a second groove kick in the earlier races here this morning. Do you think that's where you're going to have to go to be able to win here today, Columbus?
Well, you know, the bottom of the racetrack's definitely fast. You know, that's the place to be. I really didn't have a choice on inside or outside. I got to choose if we was in the first or second race, and we chose the first one to give us a little more time. That gave us a chance to get the car more dialed in for the race, and you know, it's going to be tough to pass on the outside, I think, and you know, definitely the guy that can pass on the outside, he's definitely ahead of the game.
Traffic is certainly going to be a concern here as well. How do you pick your way through the traffic here? How do you try to set the guys up at Columbus?
Very carefully. You know, you basically see where they're running, and you know, if you see them getting up off the bottom, you know, getting off the corner, you know, you might duck underneath them going down the straightaway, and you know, probably for the most part though, they'll be hugging the bottom, and you got to go to the outside.
We saw a lot of cars are real loose too. Is that the Keys setup?
Well, you know, the loose race cars, I think they're going to be faster in the beginning, but in the end, the loose race cars, they'll probably end up going backwards pretty fast.
You know, I used to be the youngest member of the ASA broadcasting crew, but now there's another one. His name is Josh Duvall, and he's the feature reporter in our young races, and here's his prediction.
Thanks, Ralph. There's 14 rookies this year, so I'm not going to commit to any one, but you got to look at Eddie Sharp, who's got the backing of former champion and Rookie of the Year here in ASA, Johnny Benson Jr., and then you got people like Brett Bell, who have experience of racing in ASA before. He had a third at MIS last year. So on to you, Brian.
All right, Josh, thanks. We'll certainly be watching that rookie battle. Last year's rookie contenders, well, they're going to have to get their TV time the old-fashioned way. They're going to have to earn it, and they'll do just that when we come back to the Buckeye 300. Welcome back, everybody, to the Buckeye 300 here at Columbus Motor Speedway, presented by Nationwide. We're a few minutes away from the start of this very first race of the 1995 ASA season. Well, it isn't really the very first race because we had a couple of 50-lap qualifiers to set the field for this one. And, Rob, if those gave us any indication of what we're about to see here, we're going to see some terrific racing on this brand-new paved racetrack.
We knew what to expect in these qualifying races. 12 drivers loaded and went home after those qualifiers. 44 cars showed up, took timed runs yesterday, and all that really did, other than the front row, was set the fields for the 50-lap qualifying races. Rick Beebe made a brilliant run from deep in the pack in his qualifying races, and as he said, cut a tire down late in the going, which means he's a spectator for the 200-lap portion. You really cannot afford to sit out, Brian, a single race if you're a rookie or a veteran gunning for either the rookie title or the championship.
Well, we saw in the rookie battle, at least, that it came down to just every single race, a neck-and-neck battle all the way along, and for the championship, it was no difference. Now, here are some of the highlights from the qualifying races. This was the very first race, and up front, some familiar faces, but also some new ones contending for the lead spot here.
You could see Gary St. Amant deep in the pack. They inverted the start. And that's Steve Holzhausen spinning. Car just got a little bit loose. Didn't appear that there was any contact. Tom Jones's machines was damaged. So was, we thought, Bill Baird's car. That's it on the left side of your screen, that bright red and black one. Tom Jones was severely damaged, but it was body work only. It was cosmetic.
And here's Bob Seneker going around the outside of Mike Miller, who was cutting down a tire just about at this very time here. Miller had worked his way from 4th to 3rd and up to the lead, but it was Bob Seneker taking the checkers after Mike Miller dropped out, and this guy ran away with it.
Second race started with Bordeaux, Pat Bordeaux on the pole. Glenn Allen parlayed his third-place start to a lead here in his car number 15, but it didn't last long, as about 15 laps in, after a caution, Mike Eddy caught him, worked on him for no more than half a lap, and took away the top spot, which he would never relinquish.
Well, we thought that little Glenn was running good until we found out, because Mike Eddy, who we always know runs good, took the checkered flag, so he will start way up front in the starting grid on this one. So Mike Eddy, a familiar face up front, some good racing action, a little bit of crash action out there, and some damaged cars. The crews are going to have to go to work quick on those to get them ready for this race, but they've already done that. Let's go down to Ralph once again in the infield.
Well, you know, it's getting real hectic and real busy down here. All the drivers are doing driver introductions and so forth. We caught up with one guy, Tony Roper. Now, Tony, your car qualified 4th, and you're going to start 8th here on the 8th row today.
8th row. We had a little trouble in the qualifying race, but we just got stacked up on a little accident. It wasn't no big deal. Car's working good. We're ready to go.
One other guy who had lots of problems in that qualifying race, Tom Jones, you got the Felpro car banged up.
Yeah, it got a little bit banged up. I got nestled in between a bunch of cars, some stopping and some didn't, and I was in the middle, so I tore the front end off the car, and we had to go off and do some repairs. So the Felpro pace checks, Quartermasters, Pontiac with Valvoline, we're going to try again. We were pretty fast in the race. I'd moved up, I started back a ways, and I was up to about 5th place, and then all that stuff started happening, and I got in the middle of it, so I feel pretty good about the race.
Well, let's step back here behind you and grab this guy while we got a chance here, too. Dave Sensiba, you had a great rookie season last year, and now you're a veteran on the AC-Delco Challenge Series. Does that change your attitude? And you got a beard going, too.
Yeah, it changed our attitude. It's, you know, a lot more easy going around all the guys, and you come out here to race now. You ain't got to worry about finishing. We come out here, race as hard as we can, and hope we're there at the end.
Is that a rookie beard, or is that a veteran beard?
No, that's a veteran beard, I guess.
Dave Sensiba.
We'll be right back after this commercial break with the moment that you've all been waiting for. The command for gentlemen, start your engines. And the Buckeye 300 presented by Nationwide will be underway. Hello again, everybody, and welcome back to Columbus, Ohio for the Buckeye 300. We will be getting this race started here just very, very shortly. We did have some delays involved with getting those qualifiers finished and getting the starting grid set, but as you can see, the drivers are getting ready to get this one underway. The last of the introductions are being done, and we will have the command to start engines here shortly. There's Joey Knott, the driver of the number 48 car, and some of the folks that are getting ready to go. And down in the infield, Ralph Shaheen has cornered the driver of the number 53 Wisconsin Aviation machine.
You know, Scott Hansen is one driver who always gets his season off, started early, and he gets some race victories under his belt. And you did that again this year with some big wins already. How much momentum does that help you carry into the beginning of the ASA season?
Well, it means a lot, you know, just getting back started with the team again and getting all our differences worked out. It's a good deal, you know, go down there, and them guys from All Pro are really a tough bunch of guys to run with, and that was definitely a boost. And we had another one of them going here a week ago, but it just didn't turn out quite as good. But it's a good deal, you know. I just wish we were running a little bit better here, but I think we'll definitely be exciting to watch anyway.
In the beginning of the show, we were all talking about how if you want to win this championship, you got to go through Mike Eddy. He's got 7. He looks like he'll get 8 eventually. How do you get through Mike Eddy for a championship? Have you learned a lot about that over the last couple of years?
Well, I think consistency is going to be the key to this. Mike's run real good. He wins a lot of races, but he's also broke a lot of things over the last few years, whether it just be bad luck on his part or equipment getting down a little bit. I don't know what it is. I'm sure it's not that, but with the equipment. But, you know, you get your turn in the bucket with your luck, and you need as much luck as you need skill in auto racing.
Well, luck for Scott Hansen's been working pretty good. He's already got a couple wins in 1995.
Thanks, Ralph. As we look down on the starting grid here, America's premier short track racing series is just about to kick off the 1995 season, as we've said a couple of times, Rob Albright. And, well, I tell you what, we've been waiting a long time, and it sure is good, even though it's cold out here, to be ready to start this first race of the season.
You just took a peek at local hero Gary St. Amant, who's run more laps here than anybody, won more races here than anybody, but this is really all new for Gary as well. All new pavement. 35 of the 44 qualifiers yesterday broke the old track record that was set 3 years ago by Johnny Benson. My concern with the times about 3/4 of a second faster, that's a phenomenal amount of time over a 1/3 mile oval, is it would become a one-groove racetrack. But Mike Miller and Bob Seneker proved in the first qualifying race, as well as Mike Eddy in the second one, that you can make it work on the high side.
Well, we've also heard a couple of the drivers talking about the fact that the leaders are going to be stuck down on the inside, but if you're going to pass, you've got to be able to drive around the outside. So the second groove is going to have to be a matter of necessity if drivers are going to be wanting to pass. So they've set these cars up to run down on the inside. There's Jeff Neal, the driver of the number 75 car, and you've already said one of the best-looking new cars. Well, he's down there with Ralph.
You know, Brian, in 1994, Trackside Motorsports made one of the biggest pickups they could do, and they got Jeff Neal, and everybody said, boy, that could be a really strong combination. And we're seeing that paying off already in the beginning of 95. You're on the front row. What is it about this team and you that meshes so well?
Well, I tell you what, Dick Hoffman at Trackside Motorsports, they provide me some first-class equipment. We've got some first-class sponsors. Pyro Performance Products, Splitfire has been with me for years, and you know, you got to have confidence in that with everybody, and they've got confidence in me, and I've got confidence in them, and it shows.
Well, you know what? We can't go racing without you in the car. They're ready for you, so why don't you go get in the car, and we'll get set to go racing. Good luck to you today.
Thanks. Good, because I'm getting cold.
Something else that gives him a lot of additional confidence, Brian, his dad, Ron Neal, has formed a corporation down in North Carolina with Harold Elliott, who formerly built racing engines for Alan Kulwicki, Dick Trickle, Mark Martin, and in fact built the power plants that Rusty Wallace drove to a Winston Cup championship in 1989. They will build ASA motors exclusively for Jeff.
Well, that'll be another item in his arsenal there for Jeff Neal. Starting on the pole in this very first race, we saw a couple of the young fans getting ready to take a look at the American Speed Association very first race of the season. There's some battle scars already on the number 81 car of Harold Fair, and a lot of racing action getting ready to go. Those young fans, of course, a part of the American dream. The great American dream is alive and well in ASA racing, we're fond of saying, and that's because this is racing that is accessible and affordable both for drivers, team owners, fans, and everyone, and we welcome you to another great season. There's the brand new Maisto sponsored number 07 car of Todd Forbes, and looking down inside the helmet there of the number 84 driver, that would have to be the Johnsonville Sausage number 84, the Bluebird, Bob Seneker.
You know, as we get ready to go in this 1995 racing season, it isn't just so much, Brian, that I was impressed by the number of rookies who've entered the $50,000 Pat Shower Chase. It's the places from which they've come. Brett Bell has seemed to open the floodgates of drivers from out west. We've had 2 or 3 drivers register for the rookie program from California, another one who's on the roster from Oklahoma. He didn't make the race. Another one from Texas did not make the race. Rick Beebe, who's from Kansas, qualified a car for Bobby Dotter at our I-70 race last year on the pole and led it early. He now takes over as the primary team driver for John Freeman, who moves out of the driving seat into the car owner's position. They've got excellent equipment. It's just, you know, it's going to be tight all season long.
Well, I like a lot of the changes because many of them have been for the better. We have to say that there are a lot of win-win situations in the way some of the changes have taken place. We've seen, of course, some great-looking new race cars, and there are a lot of drivers who occupy new positions behind the wheel with high hopes for this 1995 season. There's a look at the number 26 machine of road racing, somewhat road racing specialist Bill Baird, who did a great job in the qualifier here this morning. And he looks like he's ready to go as well, as I know all of you are. We continue to await the signal for the start of this Buckeye 300 presented by Nationwide, right along with all of you at home. We have a well-bundled up crowd. The stands are full here at Columbus Motor Speedway. A lot of people have come out to see this first race of the 1995 season for the American Speed Association. And there you can tell they are bundled up, as I almost left home yesterday wearing Bermuda shorts. I definitely had short sleeves on. Guess who didn't watch the Weather Channel before they left Atlanta?
It didn't do you any good. I'll tell you, I flew out of Fort Myers. It was 90 degrees. I watched the Weather Channel. It was supposed to be 70 and sunny today.
Well, we understand that the command is about to be given. This time it's for real, folks. So let's go down to Ralph Shaheen in the infield, who will get them started.
Well, as you said, Brian, we're ready to go, and Henry Quatman has come out from the good folks at AC-Delco to help get us started. Henry, how about if you kick this thing off here today?
Gentlemen, start your engines.
The engines have fired up, and shortly the cars will be rolling off. The next thing we will see will be the waving of the green flag from Roger Slack, and this one will be underway. Join us when you come back. We are rolling, and we are happy. Just about to get the starting flag here for the Buckeye 300 presented by Nationwide. Let's take a look at the starting grid for this one. We've already met Jeff Neal and talked to Gary St. Amant, who sit in the pole position and outside of the front row, respectively, in their automobiles. They'll have the lead positions.
The veterans, Mike Eddy and Bob Seneca, who won their respective 50-lap qualifying races. Mike actually had the 9th best time yesterday, but did it with a broken shock, and Bob Seneca didn't really care where he started his qualifying race.
The third row, Brad Loney, young enough to be a rookie driver, and Dave Sensiba, winner of the Pat Schauer Memorial Rookie Driver of the Year award last time around. And as we said, now Sensiba's going to have to get his TV time the old-fashioned way and earn it. Looks like he's on his way to doing just that, sitting outside the third row.
Right, and these are the two drivers who finished third in their respective qualifying races. Glenn Allen Jr., my pick for the championship, and Joe Knott, who ran very well in this race. It was non-televised a year ago, but he could be a dark horse candidate for a victory this afternoon.
And on the fifth row, on the inside, it's Scott Hansen in the number 53 Wisconsin Aviation Ford. And on the outside, Eddie Sharp, the first of the rookie drivers who qualified for this field. A total of 5 of them made it into the race. And Eddie Sharp, high hopes for him under the tutelage of Johnny Benson Jr.
Yet another rookie contender, Jay Summers, driving for Canadian veteran legend Junior Hanley, and Matt Kenseth, who may or may not be added to the rookie program if sponsorship is finalized.
On the 7th row, Tony Raines. Of course, he's got what he hopes to be reliable equipment underneath him. No one has ever doubted his talent. And for Jay Sauter in the number 1 car on the outside there, well, he's moved into a different car, a different color. He still has that same number 1 on the outside. It remains to be seen what Jay's going to be able to do for this season.
The 8th row, veteran Kent Stauffer. We always expect to see him somewhere in the top 10 before the afternoon is over. And Harold Fair, I wrote a column and I said Harold's an outside shot for a championship. He sold his business so his odds would improve, and he pointed it out to me.
On the 9th row, Tony Roper starts in the number 10 automobile, the Childs Tire Snyder Equipment Chevrolet, and next to Bill Baird, who has shown steady and almost spectacular improvement based on what we saw from him this morning, earlier, we should say today, in the qualifying race. That's the 9th row for this Buckeye 300.
Row number 10, A.J. Cooper, the quiet young man, the Morton Enterprises Ford Thunderbird from Missouri, and the racing MD, Dr. Yale Conley, and he's from West Virginia in his Simonton Window Chevy.
As we move back through the field, we have a couple of new names, new faces here to the American Speed Association. Wearing number 31, Rick Miller. He'll be starting his car inside of row 11. On the outside, the local fans certainly have their man in this race, as Ken Sward will start and give the folks here in Columbus, Ohio, something to cheer for.
In the 12th row, Steve Holzhausen, driving again that car that Scott Hansen drove last year, and Ted Smokestad, one again of only 5 rookies to make the field.
And on row 13, a lot further back than he would want to have started, Mike Miller, who was leading briefly in the qualifying race, passed by Bob Seneca, had a cut tire on the right front side. He went straight backwards. Pat Bordeaux led, started from the pole in the second qualifying race. He finds himself alongside Mike Miller way back in the field.
1 lap to green. Brian Refner, the rookie runner-up, and Tom Jones occupy row 14.
And last but certainly not least, we have Todd Forbes in the 07 on the inside of row 15. He had some trouble in the qualifier. And Dennis Lampman, the gentle giant, rounds out the field for this Buckeye 300 presented by Nationwide.
Brett Bell, Rick Beebe, Bobby Archer, and a host of others didn't make the field. We'll update you on that list shortly.
The green flag is waving, and from the pole, Jeff Neal already gets a challenge on the outside from Gary St. Amant, who was the fastest qualifier, but he holds him off going into turn number 3. Jeff Neal in the split fire, number 75 there, and Gary St. Amant showing us early anyway that two-groove racing is alive and well here at Columbus Motor Speedway.
Behind the front-running pair, most of the drivers have elected to fall into line. Several still running the high side include Dave Sensiba and Joe Knott.
Well, now Gary St. Amant decides that perhaps trying to get around the outside may not bode too well for tire wear or anything else, So he's trying to find a spot in front of Mike Eddy. Of course, Mike Eddy not willing to relinquish that. Gary St. Amant now caught moving backwards through the field as Brad Loney in the number 33 makes his way around, pushing St. Amant finally, who gets a spot ahead of Glenn Allen Jr. in 5th.
He was patient. The big question was how long would the tires last? Goodyear brought a compound specifically designed for this new asphalt. Again, it is 3/4 of a second faster than it previously was, and we may see some nose-to-tail racing here early, Brian, but as the afternoon wears on, don't go away, because it will get good, it will get side-by-side. We've already seen that in our 50-lap races.
Well, the cool temperature here will also bode well for tire wear situations. If it was a lot hotter, the tires would go away quicker. And here is the number 81 car of Harold Fair. We have seen both the number 81 car and his other machine, the 93 car of Bobby Archer in the qualifiers, both of them throwing some smoke, so they seem to have a problem, perhaps, with the overflow on the oil tank under hard G-forces. That could be spitting some oil out there that's getting toasted and throwing some smoke.
I'm not sure that's the only problem. Archer, in fact, dropped out of his qualifying race. Fair ran to the conclusion, but it still does not look good as we should look at a battle shaping up for second position.
Oh, second position, because Jeff Neal is just about run off and hid there. You saw him disappearing out of the side of the screen as now Bob Seneker has his hands full with the number 88 Pontiac of Mike Eddy. Jeff Neal running off there about 6 or 7 car lengths ahead of the battle for second place.
And we see Brad Loney coming into frame as he ran high in his qualifying race. Exciting race with Scott Hansen. And this is, again, Jeff Neal. You can see the margin that he has as they come off turn number 4.
And you had the exact view that the fans did from our fan cam in the grandstands here at the Columbus Motor Speedway. There's Sensiba trying to go around the outside in a great race for 7th place. Scott Hansen in the 53. And there's Sensiba, last year's Rookie of the Year winner, 48. Joe Knott comes through on the inside. And Joe Knott has got a terrific crew put together under the tutelage of Chris Bradley, crew chief for Glenn Allen Jr. last year, who had so much success with that young driver. He has thrown his hat into the ring for another young driver, 23-year-old Joe Knott.
Dave Sensiba, you can see just sliding back as Hansen is now eased away from him. Sensiba knows he has nowhere to go. You can see Jay Summers in the black, car number 22, and Kent Stauffer right behind. Sensiba has to stay to the high side, Brian. There's no way for him to duck to the bottom. He's got to try to make it work. You can see a wisp of smoke coming off the left rear corner. I think it was a little bit of tire smoke. And now Scott Hansen is drifted high in car number 53 and opened the door for the kid from Ohio, Joe Knott.
So Knott in the Ravy Ford Thunderbird, the Alan Knott Toyota-sponsored machine, runs off now away from Scott Hansen, who seems to be destined at this point anyway to take more of a high line, at least in that turn 3-4 area there. We'll have to see how that develops. Now he's trying to hold off Summers in the 22 car, and Dave Sensiba falls in behind. Joe Knott heading for the leaders right now.
Scott Hansen's car did not seem to be handling all that well in his qualifying race. I'm sure they made some adjustments. Look at him trying to run right down on the bottom groove, and all of a sudden that big lead Jeff Neal had evaporated.
And Bob Seneker looked like he got a fender on the back end of the number 75 car. And Jeff Neal goes all the way around, finally gets a little bit of tire spin there in the grass and heads back into action there. Bob Seneker recovered much more quickly and fell into 5th position, while Jeff Neal will show up now on the leaderboard back at about 16th or 17th position when we restart this. There's Bob Seneker, the number 84, the ASA's winningest driver, and there is the 7-time champion of the American Speed Association. They're all going at it here at Columbus Motor Speedway. Join us. Welcome back, everybody. 19 laps down of this 200-lap feature event here in the Buckeye 300. There is the leader, Mike Eddy, who inherited the lead after Jeff Neal and Bob Seneker decided to have a little set-to here. Rob?
Well, I don't know how to comment on who was at fault there. It did look like that Jeff Neal might have lost the rear end on the race car just a touch because Bob Seneker closed in very rapidly on him. Let's look from another angle. Well, Bob's already there, and it's already blue paint on yellow as they come through turn number 4. As Jeff does his pirouette, I just knew we were going to pile up about 10 cars. Watch the move. Well, we stopped it too soon. Mike Eddy made a brilliant move to not get involved, and that's the thing of which championships are made. There's Jeff Neal. Now, where does Mike Eddy go? To the high side, and he's gone.
Followed by Brad Loney and the rest of the field, and that's the way they are right now as the green flag comes back out. Mike Eddy ahead of the young driver, Brad Loney, the number 33 car. Then it's Gary St. Amant, fastest qualifier, set outside of row 1. And Glenn Allen Jr. in the number 15 car sits in 5th spot. Bob Seneker, well, whether he contributed to or caused the spin out of Jeff Neal remains to be decided, but he nevertheless has tucked himself into 5th spot, just ahead of Joe Knott in the 48 car. Your leader is Mike Eddy. wearing 8-8 on the side of his car, going for an 8th championship in the American Speed Association, an unprecedented 8th title in all of motorsports.
And Jay Sauter just left the racetrack. It looks like his day a short one. Number 81, Harold Fair, was black flag. There's Brad Loney in car number 33. He and Mike Eddy had a whale of a battle in their qualifying race. I wonder, Brad had lost his crew chief over the winter. They filled in admirably with another guy that was on the crew. A little different look on the number, but Loney is strong here this weekend.
Well, you mentioned Harold Fair a moment ago, and we saw his number 81 car smoke in the trim class build-a-mold machine. He is down with Ralph Shaheen. Ralph?
You can see, Brian, they're working on the back end of Harold Fair's car. Harold, what's wrong with it?
Well, we broke a transmission in the qualifying race, and apparently the seal popped out of the new transmission, didn't have a safety clamp on it. It popped out, lost the fluid, and it started smoking. We're trying to get it repaired now so we can get back out there.
Early season blues for the Pontiac of Harold Fair.
Mike Eddy in the black 88 continues to lead, being challenged by the young and very aggressive Brad Loney and his number 33 machine with the Flex Steel Winnebago H&W Chevrolet colors on, and picked up a new associate sponsorship also with STP for the year. We'll be talking more about that perhaps later on in the season. 28 laps down out of 200 that will be contested here for this feature event. The Buckeye 300 made up of 2 50-lap qualifiers plus a 200-lap feature, and that's the way it sits right now with 3 cars trying to run off and high. A little surprise at Glenn Allen Jr. as A.J. Cooper comes to a halt on the outside of the racetrack up in turn number 2, and I'm a little bit surprised that Glenn Allen Jr. has dropped back away from the first, second, and third place battle. There's the 71 machine of A.J.
I think that's pretty much by design. The guys don't know what to expect in terms of tire wear, and I think that was very much planned by Glenn Allen Jr.
Once again, let's go to Ralph Shaheen for some more word on Jay Sauter, who you mentioned earlier dropped out of the race. Ralph?
Well, Brian, they were having troubles with the car. The carburetor was flooding a little bit on them, so they had to fix that, and they got that all squared away. He's back out on the racetrack now, a couple laps down.
Well, now, Ralph, your job is to find out what happened to A.J. Cooper, who just pulled over and parked on the side of the racetrack. As we get ready to watch some very important messages here, we'll unscramble some of the mysteries and solve them for you when we come back. The yellow flag still waving, but the green flag is about to come out. There you're taking a look at the top 10 in the field right now for the Buckeye 300. A.J. Cooper in the Morton Enterprises National Burn Foundation Ford Thunderbird parked it up against the wall. We'll figure out exactly why here in just a few minutes, but that is why the caution flag came out. Also swinging up into the pits, and the pits are on the outside of the racetrack, was Jeff Neal. A number 75 car went out there after a set 2 there with Bob Seneker. The green flag coming back out again on Mike Eddy and the number 88, who continues to lead this race. And there is Brad Loney in the number 33 car. Behind him there, pushing him pretty hard. Gary St. Amant now also in a little bit of a battle with Glenn Allen Jr. in the 15. There's Seneker in the blue 84 coming back to it. And there is some debris on the racetrack that will have to be dealt with before this race can really get underway. Now, that's real live, honest-to-goodness debris, and they haven't yellow flagged anything for that fender laying out there on the track, Rob.
As things remain under single file, Brian, let me give you, the yellow is going to come out. I wanted to give a quick rundown of the drivers that did not make the race. Brett Bell, Rick Beebe, Bobby Archer, Cindy Peterson, Todd Oliver, Steve Shive. Those are all rookies, as was Kirk Rogers and Brandon Sperling. Ray Skillman did not qualify, nor did Dave Anspaugh, Randy Larson, Larry Conroy, Steve Barnes, or Donnie Varco.
Well, there's the fender about to leave with a little bit of help right now. We got a quick minute. Let's check in once again with Ralph Shaheen, who's got a story about the number 75 car that went from first to next to last real quick, Ralph.
Well, that would be Jeff Neal, and Jeff had a problem with the car being too tight, so they came in and changed both rear tires, and that loosened him up. A.J. Cooper has brought his number 71 Ford in here, and A.J., you got the helmet off. It looks terminal?
Yeah, I think we broke something in the transmission or rear end. It just started vibrating going down the front straightaway and just rolled over.
It's frustrating, these early season blues that a lot of drivers are suffering through. Just on the other side of A.J. Cooper is Jay Sauter's car that is back into the pit area. Problems with that car continue as well. Papardo changing tires, gentlemen, as we go back to green.
Back to green flag racing here in the AC-Delco Challenge Series as the 1995 season is just some 39 laps old right now. And Mike Eddy still leading Brad Loney out front, Gary St. Amant, Glenn Allen Jr., and Bob Seneker, the top 5 in this race as they stand right now. Joe Knott, the number 48 machine, and Scott Hansen back there, Dave Sensiba, and then the number 22 machine there of Summers. That's pretty much the front end of the field. We've seen a great run up from behind by the number 18 car, Mike Miller. Again, my favorite. I've made no attempt to hide that. He has run from 25th to 12th position and is challenging among the lead pack. Brian Reffner in the number 5 car has run from 27th to 14th position. So a couple of drivers making great runs from the back of the field, while a few have had their misfortunes, and Jeff Neal in particular has gone from the front to the back of the bunch.
Tom Jones showing a lot of smoke in the Fel-Pro Pontiac as Brad Loney closes in on the back bumper of Mike Eddy's car number 88. Now you can see them off turn number 4. Lap after lap, they're electing completely different lines through that corner. Brad runs a slightly higher line around this racetrack. That puts additional weight, therefore additional heat, into the right front tire, and it could cost him later on. We'll have to see.
Scott Hansen trying to make a move on Dave Sensiba right there. He seems to have the handling problems that were bothering him a little bit earlier in the race. Well in check right now. Behind him is the 22 machine of Summers trying to make a move on Scott Hansen. So Jay Summers going after the 53 car, who in turn is now moving around to the outside. Looks like Summers will get inside there of Scott Hansen, and it will be the number 22 car that will head towards Dave Sensiba again. Hansen apparently, just as soon as I said he had the handling troubles figured out, well, perhaps not.
Well, he is going backwards. At the start of this race, he moved quickly up to 5th position, and now he's dropped a couple of spots in just the last few laps, relinquishing first 6th to Sensiba, and now 7th to the leading rookie in this race, Jay Summers.
Continue to watch the battle in 6th and 7th spot there. The 5 lead cars have kind of run off and hit. Well, 3 of them have anyway. Mike Eddy just rock steady Mike Eddy up front in the number 88 car. Brad Loney trying him on the outside a couple of times, trying him on the inside, and as you said, just might be doing nothing more than wearing out a bunch of tires trying to chase after the 88 car. Gary St. Amant just driving along back there, watching the 2 of them, and then there's some space back to 4th position in the racetrack. Earlier we saw some trouble for the number 0 car, the 0 hero Tom Jones. He's down there with Ralph, which of course is no particular honor when the race is still going on. Ralph?
Yeah, you can see them working on the rear end of the car. Tom's still sitting in it. Tom, what's wrong with the car?
We had a broken air line or one oil line before. We fixed it. I think they put too much oil in it.
Tom Jones sits here patiently while the crew works feverishly on the backside of the car.
As they let the car down off the jack right now after having taken some excess fluid out of the race car, Tom Jones, we will expect to see him back in action here. Down several laps, though, as you might expect.
Mike Eddy putting a lap on the racing surgeon, Dr. Yale Conley, who did some wrist surgery on the racing school principal, Dave Anspaugh, over the winter. Anspaugh's now a doctor also, but he's one of those guys with a PhD rather than an MD after
There's
his name.
one more, isn't there? Does Dave Sensiba have a degree as well?
Dr. Dave? I don't think so.
I thought you said that yesterday.
Doctor of Dollars after winning the $40,000 rookie prize last year, maybe.
And working well in this race right now. He continues to be among the contenders there behind Mike Eddy, of course, in the 88 car who is leading. Bob Seneker came out of that little duet there with Jeff Neal a lot better than Jeff did. Jeff is having to work his way up from the back of the field while Bob Seneker sits in contention right now up front in 5th position. Mike Eddy going around the outside and putting a lap on the gentle giant Dennis Lampman there. And so they've already run into traffic as Brad Loney now tries to find a way around the number 9 car as well.
I told you a little earlier, I thought Glenn Allen was letting the lead trio get away by design. Now I'm not sure, as it looks like Mike Eddy, Brad Loney, and Gary St. Amant have put significant distance between themselves and the 4th running car of Glenn Allen. But Allen is not getting much heat from Bob Seneker. And Seneker, if anyone, knows how to pace himself for a race. It's still very, very early.
Well, maybe young Glenn Allen Jr. has learned, taken a page out of the Bob Seneker book on how to win ASA races, and he's being patient as well, figuring, well, you know, 1 caution flag and I'm right back up there again. The gaps will all close up. And we've seen several caution flags in the race, and it's not out of the question that another one could come out here and improve the situation very quickly for Glenn Allen Jr. The situation that is degraded very slowly could improve quickly with a caution flag.
This is the first ASA race of the season, but the drivers running 1st and 3rd have had some success in the off-season. Mike Eddy lived a charmed life in Florida, winning 6 of 7 races at Volusia County in February, and Gary St. Amant won the prestigious Snowball Derby in Pensacola, also back in the month of January.
with 60 laps down in this 200-lap final of the Buckeye 300. The fans are looking on with great anticipation, and we are too. Motorhome facilities for Group 5 sports and the AC-Delco Challenge Series are provided by Winnebago Industries. For more information about Winnebago, call 1-800-643-4892. Winnebago Motorsports with us in more ways than one here at the AC-Delco Challenge Series. There's Mike Eddy holding on to the lead. The number 87 car of Tony Raines has just had a lap put on it. And now Brad Loney in the number 33 trying to find his way around Tony Raines as well. With 72 laps in the record book right now, Raines holding on to what looks like second spot, but in fact, he's a lap down.
Tony Raines was working on Ted Smokestad to pick up a position, trying to put some daylight between himself and Mike Eddy. They made contact, and Eddy got a little sideways. Loney was almost able to take over the lead in the process, but he settles in behind it. Gary St. Amant just lurking, waiting for a mistake, I think, by either Loney or Eddy, and an opportunity to capitalize.
Part of that focus that we spoke of with Gary St. Amant, maybe he's focused much further down the road in this AC-Delco Challenge Series toward a championship. That is what he has said, and perhaps laying back, waiting, and watching is part of that focus. Now, just a few minutes ago, while you were watching the commercial break back home, we were watching a battle for 9th place. Scott Hansen, the number 53, Wisconsin Aviation Machine, started 9th. Mike Miller, the number 18, and that is the Atlanta Communications Pontiac, started 25th. And there was the pass, taking Brian Reffner with him. So Scott Hansen, who was desperately trying to hold on to the 9th position that he started in, has been passed by two drivers, one of whom started 25th, the other 27th. Clearly, Mike Miller and Brian Reffner moving towards the front, while Scott Hansen continues to experience troubles in the number 53 machine.
Brian Reffner getting off to a rocky start in his sophomore season, had a poor qualifying run yesterday and got tangled with somebody else early in his qualifying race, lost the back bumper, and it relegated him to a finish deep among the finishers of that race. He was added to the starting grid, but as you mentioned, coming from 27th to now run up in the 9th position.
There are battles going on all over the racetrack, some of them working in traffic as well. Mike Eddy has cleared himself of all the traffic, but not for long, and it's going to be interesting because the next car that Mike Eddy will be approaching, and you just saw it briefly there, is the number 75 machine of Jeff Neal. Jeff, of course, spinning out earlier, going in for a little bit of reset on the setup on the car. It was a little bit tight, and the split fire All-City Chevrolet about to get lapped, trying not to, by Mike Eddy. There are the two of them right now. Mike Eddy, the leader in the race. Jeff Neal, the tail end of the field right now on this Columbus Motor Speedway.
As we continue to watch Mike Eddy lead, we'll remind you that Brad Loney runs second. Gary St. Amant is third. Glenn Allen Jr. is in fourth position, right ahead of Bob Seneker. In sixth spot is Joe Knott in car number 48. Seventh is Dave Sensiba in car number 4. And Scott Hansen continues to go backward, and isn't that an interesting battle for position, because that car number 78 is the one that Hansen drove when he left Jerry Gunderman at the midpoint of 1994. He's now back with Gunderman, and Holzhausen has taken over the car that Hansen vacated.
And Scott Hansen, of course, behind the wheel of a Thunderbird. There is the Thunderbird of the number 78 there of Steve Holzhausen, who earned a victory last year, pitched a shutout, as we said. A little bit later on, we'll be talking about the winning move of this Buckeye 300. Last year, the winning move for Steve Holzhausen was when Roger Slack dropped the green flag. He led 400 out of 400 laps to win at Anderson.
Of course, the first race of the year last year for an early race was pretty exciting, too, when Butch Miller passed Jay Sauter on the last turn of the last lap for the winning move. So it doesn't matter. You never can afford to walk away from the television set. It can happen at any time.
The first lap to the last. Stay glued to the screen because anything can happen, as you said. Here is another Mike Eddy battle in traffic there as he's working on.
And Dave Sensiba is off the pace. Car number 4, Dave Sensiba, has come to a crawl out of turn number 3. The yellow flag is waved by official starter Roger Slack, and a couple of drivers almost collect him as Sensiba's got some serious problems. We had seen a lot of smoke out of that car in the middle of the turns, which very often indicates that the rear end has a problem in that race car. I'm sure Ralph he's probably already there, may already even know.
Well, he's certainly on his way, and there is the leader, Mike Eddy, staying out of trouble. And the only one giving him any trouble is the number 33, Brad Loney. We'll be back to the Buckeye 300 in just a moment. How would you like to really be a part of the race team? Well, Racing Electronics, the official communications equipment supplier to the American Speed Association, is giving away a unit and Bearcat scanner along with a 1-year's racer frequency membership on each ASA telecast. That's each and every time we're on the air, you have a chance to win. To enter this drawing, send your name and address on a postcard to Racing Electronics Box GFS, 8701 Mallard Creek Road, Charlotte, North Carolina, or the address on your screen.
And they even work in the North Pole, because I feel like we're about 2/3 of the way there today. The spotters did look cold.
A lot of folks in the stands here with the scanners on, and one of the members of Ricochet, Ralph Shaheen's crew, has got a scanner because that helps him nose out the stories down on pit road. He's got another one, Ralph.
Gee, just when I thought I was going to be able to fake it, pretend like I knew everything. Now you got to tell them I have a scanner to help me out with. Thanks, Trevor. Well, problems down here for Dave Sensen with the 1994 Rookie of the Year is up on the jack stand. What's the problem, Dave?
This West Michigan Chevy Lane Automotive was running good today, and I think we broke a drive shaft or spur gears. They're checking it out right now.
We can also tell you that Scott Hansen's car was real tight. He came in, took on some new tires on the right side of his car. Todd Forbes' car came in. He's having a miss in the engine, plus he had a tire going down. They took care of both of those problems. The crew continues to work. I'm Dave Sensen's entry.
Hey, before we go back to green, I want to extend some congratulations. We talk about our producer, Joel McKee, and our director, Gary Clem, being the best in the business. Well, that's no hype. We understand that Gary has been noted as the Distinguished Alumni of the Year from the Telecommunications Department of Ball State University. Guess who one of his classmates was who's also won that award?
You got me.
David Letterman.
Oh!
He's in some fast company, isn't he?
I'll tell you what.
It must be good to be in there with our Gary Clem, eh?
He's in fast company with trying to keep track of you, me, and Ralph Shaheen and all the camera positions out there on the racetrack. We're back under green. Jeff Neal, of course, a lap down, running side by side with Gary St. Amant. Out front, it is still Mike Eddy and Brad Loney. And that is pretty much a case of, well, age and treachery outdoing youth and enthusiasm for the moment, at least, as Mike Eddy.
Oh, and Jeff Neal gets spun this time by car number 7. Gary St. Amant sits right in the middle of the racetrack. And cars going high and low. Jeff trying to get it re-fired, and he's dropped down right in front of Jay Sauter and Bill Baird. And again, Jeff has been the victim of some bad luck, but it's got a two-sided, it's got a silver lining to it, Brian, because he could have been nailed on each occasion, and he's been able to keep going. And he was trying to get another shot at getting his lead lap back. Gary St. Amant was trying to put him a lap down. And we understand he had gotten a lap penalty because he had passed the leader after the yellow flag came out.
That is why, well, we saw him stopped in front of Roger Slack's position here on the start-finish line, and that's exactly what was going on, though. Bad luck continues to follow misfortune for Jeff Neal. And here's another look at just exactly what happened. There's Mike Eddy and Brad Loney coming through, and there's Jeff Neal facing definitely the wrong way and pouring a lot of smoke. Boy, he got it stopped in the middle of the racetrack. Got to give him credit for that, and for the rest of these drivers for getting around a car broadside in this very small racetrack.
First one on the scene was Glenn Allen in car number 15. That might be a good candidate for the wins-winning move, the way he went around Jeff Neal, just barely avoiding contact.
The omniscient Ralph Shaheen has more. Ralph?
Well, we're waiting for Jeff Neal to make his way around to the pits. They kind of have to loop around here. It's sort of a wild parking lot type of configuration back here at Columbus. We do want to tell you that he was penalized, but Jeff radioed into the ASA officials and said, I was just waiting for the pace car. They agreed with that and let him get his lap back. Now the problem for Jeff is due to the incident, he's changing right side tires to get himself back on some good rubber. Yale Conley pitted. His car's been hung up in neutral. His crew is working on the number 3 machine.
Neutral is the gear that doesn't work real well when you're out on the racetrack.
And our Canadian official starter was just doing a little skating. There's some fluid. You can see right in front of him there's a shiny line, and apparently somebody dumped some fluid out on the racetrack.
Well, they're going around with the oil dry, trying to get rid of it. And while the track crew works on the track, here's a quick look at the top 10 for the Buckeye 300, and we'll be right back with the second half of this race right after this. For all of our young racing fans, if you have a question about racing or about your favorite driver, our colleague Josh Duvall will be here again this year with a Young Racers feature. Just send your questions to Young Racers, P.O. Box 26792, Charlotte, North Carolina, 28221. That's it on your screen. And Josh will have one of our ASA racers answer your question on the air. The American Dream alive and well in the AC-Delco Challenge Series. Let's go once again down to our Dreamboat pit reporter, Ralph Shaheen.
The big problem why everybody's spinning here today, Brian, they're doing it early. They're taking on right side tires because of the cool temperatures. Everybody guessed on their chassis setups, but it was even cooler and cloudier than they expected it to be this morning. So if they're off on their chassis setup, the car ends up being tight. Not loose, but too tight. So everybody's trying to loosen the car up a little bit. And they'll do that two ways. They'll either make an adjustment to the chassis by messing with the wedge, or they can also play with their air pressures. That's about it. If you didn't guess right, you're pretty much stuck with it at this point.
Well, and we still have not yet determined who among the leaders will make a pit stop. We've reached the halfway point. Some had said we know they can go all the way on fuel. They would stop if they needed tires, but we may see 200 laps without a stop. And there's Joe Knott. He's car number 48 up into the 5th position. As just before we went to caution. We can take a look now at the top 20. Mike Eddy, Brad Loney, and boy, they've been that way for a long time, first and second.
And there you can see for the first time in the top 10, Mike Miller and Brian Reffner, who we mentioned a couple of times, ran all the way from the back of the field, 25th and 27th starting positions to get where they are. Tony Roper starts the list in the second 10 of this race. And we see some of the guys who have been having trouble. Scott Hansen, the 53, started 9th. He's moving back through the field. Ted Smokestad, the final car on the lead lap, in 16th spot.
He did go a lap down just before we went to that caution, so Smokestad will be one lap down in car number 32, which would leave 15 cars, I think, now on the lead lap.
I can always count on Rob Albright to correct me if I say something.
Oh, no. No, it's never me anymore. It's the Torch. I used to be able to do it in my head. It's the Torch Miller.
That's right.
He's our brain. I told him this morning we showed up, we didn't have our Torch package of all the information we need to do the race, and I got spoiled. He's the guy who needs to do the homework.
Well, for all of you at home that are fans of the Know-It-All brothers, Torch, Scorch, and Zorch, we have Torch and Scorch with us this weekend. Of course, they are our statisticians here on the Group 5 Sports television broadcast of the AC-Delco Challenge Series. The American Speed Association has its own scorers. They're up here in the booth with us, too. And we take our information from our own scorers, who, of course, verify it with the official ASA scores. And amazingly enough, these guys do agree with one another most of the time. They seem to be watching the same race.
Most of the time. As we get ready to go back to green, again, this is the 6th year of AC-Delco's involvement, the 5th year for television. We're excited that they continue to be involved in helping these guys chase that great American dream of being the short track stock car king of the United States. And right now, it's Mike Eddy gunning for an 8th championship and a 2nd successive win here at Columbus.
The premier short track racing series in these United States is the American Speed Association's presentation. We have 16 telecasts for you this year, 18 total races on the schedule. And Mike Eddy going after an unprecedented 8th title in all of motorsports. Of course, he was equaled this year by his teammate Dale Earnhardt down south, and now the two of them are going for an 8th title. Who will get it first? Well, we got a little bit of an advantage because if Mike Eddy takes his title, we finish our season just a few weeks before they do. So if Mike Eddy wins his 8th championship, it will be the first driver ever to win 8 championships in any motorsport.
Not before the long before the last caution, Joe Knott had gotten around Bob Seneker, and after the green was redisplayed, Seneker got out of shape, and here's how that happened. Look at Jay Summers going to the low side. Seneker drifts up high. Summers makes slight contact. You can't blame Jay for that one. He maintained his line down at the bottom, allows Seneker to get the car righted.
And Mike Miller hard on the brakes trying to avoid the two of them, and Mike Miller, of course, we mentioned before, he has now moved himself up a couple more spots in this race and is definitely heading for the front. Question is, will he be wearing out his tires a little quicker than everybody else, running harder than they are, or will he be able to hold on as some of the other drivers? Well, they're balancing the issue right now, whether to stop for fuel and or tires before this one ends. We're 110 laps into a 200-lap race, and Mike Eddy, who took the lead early, has held on to it ever since.
And maybe the little bump and run was a wake-up call for Bob Seneker as he's retaken that position from Joe Knott. Now, Joe gets tangled up behind the lapped car, Ted Smokestad, car number 32, and loses a couple more spots, this time to Jay Summers and a charging Mike Miller.
And there's Harold Fair in the 81 car back in after fixing his mechanical problems earlier. There's the 18 of Mike Miller, 81, the build-a-mold Pontiac. And here's the battle for third now. We have seen these two run at 3rd and 4th. Gary St. Amant, the number 7 Wins machine, and the number 15 car of Glenn Allen Jr. And he drives that CarQuest Eaglewood Construction, the new sponsor for him, Pontiac.
At the midpoint of this race, we've had 2 different leaders, just a single lead change as Mike Eddy went to the front and stayed there. Currently 16 cars showing on the lead lap, 5 caution periods for a total of 26 laps. And what a great battle that is for 3rd position between a couple of really good friends. Glenn Allen Jr., and of course from Cincinnati. He was a sports standout there in high school. And Gary St. Amant, everybody loves him. He and his family, a very prominent family here in the Columbus area. And Gary is probably the man of choice here today if you were to take a poll among the racing fans. If not, maybe then the youngster Joe Nod. But Glenn Allen also earned his first victory here, and we've got several cars together coming out of turn number 4. Eddie Sharp tangles with Scott Hansen and Todd Forbes. Sharp has a left rear tire that has been cut down, and Dennis Lampman was involved as well in car number 9, and he sustained some damage.
Dennis Lampman sustained a lot of damage during the 1994 season. And it looks as though 1995 is starting off much the same way. There's the 50 car of rookie driver Eddie Sharp, who has signed on as a contender for that $50,000 Pat Shower Memorial Rookie of the Year prize, won last year by Dave Sensiva. It was worth $40,000 last year. It's gone up, as has all the prize money. The purses in the American Speed Association, the AC-Delco Challenge Series. AC-Delco putting up more money this year, $3.3 million in prizes and contingencies available for these drivers. An American dream, alive and well, you'd have to say so, as these drivers are all going for a quite big purse. Let's take another look at it here if we can.
And you can see there is Dennis Lampman, Eddie Sharp in tow. Sharp gets into the back end of Lampman as Brian Repner was trying to go to the high side of the racetrack.
Tom Jones gets around. Oh, and just, no, that's not Tom Jones. That's the 37 car there.
What a disappointment for Eddie Sharp. He had a quiet but consistent run here this afternoon. As we've mentioned, he's a protege of Johnny Benson. That race car last year was driven to the championship by Butch Miller. And you can see Lampman going all the way around and hits the left rear corner of Eddie Sharp's car number 50. Now, whether or not there was significant damage or if it's simply a bent wheel and a flat left rear tire, we're going to find out. We'll see how quickly Eddie comes back onto the racetrack.
Well, we'll take a cut away from the action here while we're under caution and let them clean up the racetrack a little bit. Fans are looking on. We hope you are too. Join us in a moment. Welcome back, everybody, and thanks for joining these folks at the Buckeye 300, presented by Nationwide here at Columbus Motor Speedway in Ohio. The car's circulating under caution here with 119 laps gone. Ralph Shaheen has an update on the latest altercation out on the racetrack. Ralph?
Luckily for both Eddie Sharp and Dennis Lampman, the damage wasn't too extensive. It was tires for both of them and a little sheet metal on the 9 machine of Dennis Lampman. They fixed that, squared both those cars up, and they're back out.
Of course, sheet metal, figuratively speaking, because the ASA cars run Kevlar body panels and not metal. In fact, part of what makes this racing so accessible and affordable for a lot of the teams, they don't have to replace expensive sheet metal. Rather, they use the more inexpensive molded bodies on these cars. We're back to green flag racing now with Mike Eddy. Who else up front? Brad Loney has tried several times to get around Mike Eddy, but seems to have satisfied himself with settling in on second spot and hoping for an infrequent and uncharacteristic mistake by the 7-time ASA champion.
And I had to get a kick out of the press release we got from Brad Loney's folks. I mean, they're one of the most prolific in terms of getting us information, and I like the way they now promo themselves. The fastest Chevy in ASA racing. Well, they're certainly backing that up today. It has seemed, in fact, that over the last couple of years, drivers have opted to go, if they're GM, for the Pontiacs, and then there are about an equal number of Fords in competition. Mike Eddy, of course, has always been in that Pontiac, at least over the last several years, but Loney's sticking with the Chevy, and he's giving them a lot of exposure today and a great run in car number 33. I still haven't decided whether I like that new number or not yet, though.
Well, you know, they designed that number themselves. They were telling me about it. And Brad Loney, by the way, for those of you that are online on the internet, Brad Loney gets himself out on the internet, on America Online. He's obviously computer literate, and they designed their own number and then put it into the computer and nudged it around a little bit to make it look more like a 3. And they said they're not quite done with it yet. They're still going to play around with the look of that number. I kind of like it, and I told him so.
Brad Loney is an interesting young man. I mean, he's in his late 20s, but he still looks like he's 14. It's the youngest team in the series, average age 26, and he is really lighting it up now, putting the heat on Mike Eddy.
You know, and after all the hype that we got about the youngest team in the American Speed Association, I fully expected, you know, all winter long we've been hearing about his young team, and of course we heard about it last year. I got here this year and expected these guys to be wearing diapers and sucking on pacifiers, for crying out loud. They're a very accomplished race team. They've got a couple of new members, and they've got got one guy they call the human jack. I mean, this is a big, strong guy, and they don't even need one of those mechanical deals. He just picks the car up and they change the tires.
You know, what's amazing about this bunch is the cohesiveness that they have as a unit. In fact, we understand that they take a break on Thursday nights to go play basketball as a bunch, and that is the thing of which championships are made, Brian. I mean, the thing that has made Mike Eddy so successful is he's got the same cadre of guys that get together every year, and they know they're working for Mike Eddy. Other teams, you'll see a crew chief come and go, different crew members come and go, but you need that consistency of the same players race after race, year after year. And that's why suddenly Brad Loney is now being seen as a possible championship candidate in 95.
Well, he has certainly been on a rapid learning curve, and he has learned well. Very intelligent young man, and obviously has made his mistakes over the years and has learned from all of them, because he is right now, well, the validation comes in the form of racing for the lead in this very first race of the 1995 season against the likes of a Mike Eddy.
And he and Mike are just pulling away from Gary St. Amant. St. Amant has dropped now about 6 car lengths back. Glenn Allen Jr. hasn't appeared to be looking to make a pass. I'm sure he's in communication with his spotter, and that spotter is going to say very quickly, the front two are getting away. Glenn, you need to make your move if he has what it takes to make that pass on Gary St. Amant.
A couple of great battles on the racetrack. That for the lead, of course, and we mentioned back here for third place is Gary St. Amant, Glenn Allen Jr., Bob Seneker, Jay Summers, and now Mike Miller nudging his way up in there as Tom Jones, who has been out off the racetrack a couple of times, gets out of the way. Joe Knott coming through. Harold Fair, who has rejoined the races back there, too. There's the race for third spot. There's fifth place, Bob Seneker in the blue 84, and right behind him, Jay Summers in the 22 car. That's a race for third right now.
Hey, listen, only 5 rookies made this race. Jay Summers was one of them, and he is now in 6th position in car number 22. Now, ASA has a limit to the number of races that you can run and still contend for Rookie of the Year. Jay has never competed in more than 5 ASA events. He's been around the series for a long time. He's run periodically since the mid-1980s. He's now hooked up with Junior Hanley, who's a great car builder and a great driver himself. But Hanley now wants to campaign this young driver from Michigan for Rookie of the Year. It looks like he's made an outstanding choice based on today's performance.
Glenn Allen Jr. trying to get around Gary St. Amant, and here's the race for first.
And just as we talk about Summers, he gets tagged from behind in turn number 4 and spins. He'll give up 5th position and a whole lot of others. Nobody is going to hit him, but the yellow comes out once again, and a great run now becomes a frustrating one for Jay Summers in car number 22.
Well, he'll lose about half of the field now, and he'll be much closer to the back of the field than he was just a while ago. He was very close to the front. In fact, as you said, running in 6th spot now. Of course, that position will be inherited by the number 18 car of Mike Miller, and he will have his opportunity to race in that battle, that tight little battle for third place behind the 2 leaders, Mike Eddy and Brad Loney. We'll be back to the Buckeye 300 here. We got 60 more laps to go, and you'll want to be here for every one of them. We're still here. They're still under caution, although that's going to change really quick. Now take a look at what's going on right here between Bob Seneker and Glenn Allen Jr. And what's going on?
Seneker made a bump. Now watch this coming out of turn number 4. Glenn Allen says, "Don't do that to me. I don't like that." Let's see if we're going to catch it. I don't know, but he drove Bob right into the grass. There he goes. And a little bit of green stuff. In ASA, you don't run back to the caution, so it's wherever you are on the racetrack when the yellow is displayed. You could be on the backstretch. In fact, flagman Roger Slack decided to let him restart that race side by side. He said it was too close to call as to who was in what position. Glenn Allen Jr. has reasserted himself in 4th position, having now gone back to green.
Well, they were certainly having some discussion about it as they crossed the stripe side by side. That's how Roger Slack put him back out on the racetrack. But Glenn Allen Jr. getting the advantage now. He runs 4th, Seneker 5th. Mike Miller 6th. The 2 leaders continue to be Mike Eddy and, of course, Brad Loney in 2nd spot. Gary St. Amant, fastest qualifier, set outside row 1, has seesawed through the field there, always staying among the leaders, however, and he sits firmly in 3rd right now, but he's getting a little bit of a bump and challenge from Glenn Allen Jr. now.
Brad Loney continues to confound me, Brian. I thought that with him using consistently a slightly higher line than Mike Eddy, that he would have a right front tire gone by now. We're 147 laps, nearly 3/4 of the way into this thing, and he is hanging right with car number 88. And again, after the restart, it's Gary St. Amant that can't keep pace.
Of course, when tires go away, they kind of go away quickly, so things could change quickly for Brad Loney in the last 50 laps of this race. Let's go once again to Ralph Shaheen with an update on Glenn Allen.
You know, what's really interesting, Brian, is that we talked to both crew members of Glenn Allen and Bob Seneker, and they said that both their drivers, even though there's a lot of action going on the track, both drivers are very quiet on the radios. and they're not saying anything about the little skirmish that's going on between the two of them.
Well, they're quite off the racetrack, too, as a general rule. I mean, neither one of these guys ever find themselves in the middle of controversy. That's kind of what made it interesting. Two guys that seem to get along great off the racetrack, having just a little fender-to-fender discussion.
Well, it was almost comical because it was at walking speed. I mean, these guys are going 3 miles an hour and bumping. Well, we see a lot of bumping at ASA racing, but we usually see it at racing speeds, not under caution, going around the track at barely a crawl. So it was pretty comical.
And again, Glenn Allen wanting the position, but not wanting to take his buddy out of contention. You can also see in the rear of your frame Mike Miller crawling into the hunt in car number 18. Remember, he started back in 25th position, has made a steady progression. He's now up to 6th, and he looks to the low side of Bob Seneker.
Well, he's had to bash and bump and kind of nudge his way through the field, going from 25th to 6th position. You can see the hood on the Atlanta Communications Pontiac kind of tilted up there. A little bit of a battle scar on the race car number 18. Mike Miller, the great veteran driver, has only one victory in the American Speed Association, and that came a whole bunch of years ago. He took about 10 or 12 years off and came back with new enthusiasm last year, contended for the championship early, and is very excited about the possibility of contending for the championship again this year. We're scattering some debris out on the racetrack over on the backstretch, and it remains to be seen whether a flag will come out over that. I did see it with my own eyes, although we did not see it on camera here. And we'll just have to watch and take a look here as Mike Eddy continues to run away along with Brad Loney from the race for 3rd place that we're looking at right here.
Glenn Allen has to make his move quickly. Should we run the rest of this thing to the checkered under green flag conditions, he's got to make his move. Seneker used the outside groove in his qualifying race, and again, Glenn Allen is able to get maybe 2 or 3 inches. He can keep his foot in the throttle, get Gary St. Amant unsettled, even without spinning him out, but he doesn't want to make the pass that way. He wants to get cleanly alongside, force Gary to the high side, and make the pass in that manner. Seneker won't wait much longer, I'm sure, as he continues to take a peek at the high side of the racetrack.
Well, Glenn tried a little bit on the low side there for just a moment, but didn't see enough of an opening to make it work. We're staying out of trouble out. We're watching the race for 3rd while the 2 leaders run out front. There's Gary St. Amant, who owns 3rd spot right now. Glenn Allen Jr. in the 15 car challenging Bob Seneker and veteran Mike Miller, the 2 veteran drivers who build their own race cars from the ground up, are sitting back there watching. Here goes Jay Sauter going out of the racetrack once again as we peek in on the lead, which has looked a lot like this for about 140 laps.
And behind the leaders, it continues between Gary St. Amant, Glenn Allen Jr., Bob Seneker, and Mike Miller as they've now eased away from Joe Knott. But a 4-car freight train, Miller pulls alongside Seneker in turn number 3, but thinks better of it with Tom Jones on the high side. Again, he takes a look down low. Seneker has to be wondering now if that move to the outside was a wise one, as a fellow veteran is there to challenge him.
Well, he might have been distracted for just a moment by the appearance of Tom Jones out the right side window of his car there. These two went at it just exactly like this in the qualifier until Mike Miller in the 18 cut down a right front tire and gave it over to Bob Seneker, who went on to win that qualifier. It looks like Miller's making good on the pass.
And Glenn Allen is making good on the pass for 3rd as they come through turns 3 and 4. It was choreographed. He and Mike Miller both went under their respective contenders, and now there's been a big shuffle, 3rd through 6th positions. Glenn will now have to charge, as will Mike Miller. He now will have to do to Gary St. Amant what Glenn Allen was finally able to accomplish.
Well, we called Mike Miller Mr. Inside for a lot of last season because he seemed to be able to find a way to set up his race car to run lower than anybody else on the track. Of course, Bob Seneker has a great setup being able to do on his car, too. He builds it, as we said, from the ground up, as does Mike Miller. And when you do that to your car, you tend to know a lot more about the little things that it will do.
Oh, and Seneker sideways and spins in turn 2.
Oh, and collects Joe Knott there just briefly brushed him now. It looked like Mike Miller and Gary St. Amant going at it, and somehow Seneker might have thought that something was going on, got into the brakes. There was no contact between the front of Seneker's car and the rear of either of the other 2. He just kind of went around and collected Joe Knott in the process.
Well, he had slipped way up out of the racing groove, and he knew he had to go up there to try to make the pass, but he got a little too high out into the marbles, what we call the marbles. That's the rubber that rolls off the tires, and just flat lost it. And you very rarely see that from Bob Seneker. You can see that there's been a little bit of damage to the left rear corner, but nothing significant.
Let's take another look at it. Now remember, Tom Jones in the 0 car was on the outside of this race right here. They made approach. We may see the approach. Now here Seneca gets into the outside of the 18 car of Miller, and there's Tom parked on the outside. And here comes Seneca right on around.
You know, I don't know. Jones is way outside. He's exiting the racetrack in turn number 1. I'm not sure that had that much effect on what happened with Bob Seneca. Take another look from maybe a slightly different angle and see if we can get a bit more insight. There they are down. This is coming off turn number 4, I think.
Now he'll turn in.
Look how loose Bob Seneca is. Rear of the car way outside. Mike Miller isn't even thinking about Bob Seneca. He's looking at Gary St. Amant. He gets just a little bit too high. See how high Jones is? He's really not a factor there. I think that there's maybe a little bit of fluid or something that was slippery up out of the groove in turn number 1, and Bob just got into whatever it was.
The 84 car turned in just a little bit there, tucked the front end down into the back end of the 18 car, and around he went. Most of the rear end damage was sustained, but Joe Knott ticked him on the way by.
We hadn't been paying any attention to that lead battle, and it was continuing to be a battle as Loney was staying right with Mike Eddy. Now Glenn Allen Jr. gets a shot at the front pair.
Well, they closed it up, of course, coming off the caution flag now with a green as we restart with 31 laps remaining in this Buckeye 300.
It's Mike Eddy, Brad Loney, Glenn Allen Jr. runs 3rd, Gary St. Amant 4th, Mike Miller is 5th, 6th is Joe Knott, 7th is Brian Reffner, in 8th position is Scott Hansen, 9th is Steve Holzhausen, Seneca has dropped all the way to 10th with car number 10, Tony Roper, running in 11th position and challenging Seneca.
Now watching Brad Loney here dealing with Glenn Allen Jr., Brad has not had to really watch the mirrors too much here. There's always been a lot of room between 2nd and 3rd place on this racetrack. And for the first time really today, although we have seen flashes of it before, Brad Loney is getting a real challenge up from behind by Glenn Allen Jr., who obviously has his car handling exactly the way he wants to right now. And while Loney deals with Glenn Allen in the rearview mirror, Mike Eddy's running off and hiding.
Here's why. Brad Loney has been able to run a higher groove. That's where the car wants to go. But car number 15, Glenn Allen Jr., his car hunts for the bottom. It's right down at the yellow line. So when Brad runs his line, it allows Glenn to go to the bottom, and Brad doesn't have as much freedom to move up and down on the racetrack where he likes. He likes to run high coming off the corners and then drop back down. But with Glenn Allen tucking the nose under, Loney can't make that move back down. See there? He just isn't able to get into 1 and 3 as hard as he was. And Mike Eddy is loving every minute of it.
And in trying to protect that 2nd place position, now Glenn Allen just gets Loney a little bit loose going outside. He's got a fender underneath. Loney cuts him off again. And you can see Mike Eddy about 6 or 7 car lengths out in front while these two go at it for 2nd.
Well, the 7-time champion is all by himself, and these two guys looking for their first championship. One of these kids looking for the first victory, Brad Loney. They're having a personal war, and again, it's hard contact in turn number 1. Neither one wants to give any quarter, and Loney is not the least bit intimidated.
Rock and roll racing from a couple of the young stars of the American Speed Association, race for 2nd spot behind the veteran. Glenn Allen now gets inside of Loney, and can he make the pass stick? Now Loney can use the whole racetrack that he wanted to before, and he was trying to protect the 2nd position. He had to race where he didn't really want to. Now he's moved back to 3rd spot behind Glenn Allen Jr., who goes after the leader.
Rock and roll or classical battle for position? A little bit of both, huh?
And here is side by side now. Mike Miller, Mr. Inside, trying to put a move on Gary St. Amant, who was the fastest qualifier. Mike Miller, 13th fastest qualifier, but relegated to the back of the field after cutting down a tire in the qualifying race here today. And now Mike Miller making good on his position out in front. He runs in 4th spot. Remember, we said before he started 25th. What a charge to the front by the 18 car.
And you can see Brad Loney, you can see just out of frame, has moved back alongside Glenn Allen Jr., and he now will use the inside line, and this is the best racing of the day. Loney reappropriates 2nd.
With 19 laps to go, Brad Loney in the number 33 car has retaken 2nd place away from what looked like a very capable 15 car driven by Glenn Allen Jr. So maybe Brad Loney just dug down a little bit deeper inside for what he needed. If I'm going to be a champion, if I'm going to be a winner even, I have got to race myself all the way to the front, and now's the time to do it. 18 laps remain in this Buckeye 300.
Torch just made his first mistake in 3 years. He handed me a note. He said Joe Knott is now running on only 7 cylinders. If he is, they better check that engine. He's down a cylinder, but these are V6s. He's on 5 as Bill Baird is spun in turn number 2.
Oh, now you have absolutely destroyed the Torch. He is crestfallen back here now. His chin is resting around his navel right now. The first mistake he ever made, as far as I know. But right now, we're going to take a break, try to console our statistician, and return for the final 16 laps of this race. We knocked off a couple of more laps while you were away. We are down to 13 to go. The green flag about to come out, and as we speak, it waves with Mike Eddy trying to hold off the charging field, led by Brad Loney, who retook second position from Glenn Allen just a few moments ago. You saw that. And so we raced the last dozen laps here under... Oh, and now we got another incident on the racetrack, and it looks like the 26 car, that's Bill Baird, has come to a unscheduled stop in the middle of the track, and the yellow flag comes out once again. Keep in mind, though, at home, folks, we will race under green to the finish. It is a rule in the American Speed Association, the AC-Delco Challenge Series. We race at least 5 laps under green to the checkered flag. So don't worry about all this caution flag late in the race. We're still going to see them race for the victory.
189 laps complete. Mike Eddy had the luxury of a lapped car between himself and Brad Loney on that restart. That luxury is no longer there, so we'll see whether or not Loney is able to reassert himself. Now, it seems that the Winnebago Flex Steel Chevy is best under long runs of green, so it's going to be a tough task for anybody to beat Mike Eddy in quest for a second straight here at Columbus.
Bill Baird from Sturgis, Kentucky in the Saturn machine. Allen's Body Shop Chevrolet brings out another caution flag. There's another look at the top 10 and some of the folks who are enjoying the Buckeye 300 along with you. Welcome back, everybody, for the closing laps that will be under green of this Buckeye 300, presented by Nationwide Auto Parts, the best brands in these parts, and the best man for this race so far has been Mike Eddy, the number 88. Took the lead early and has held on to it ever since. He has been challenged ever since, however, by Brad Loney in the number 33 car, who continues to run at second spot, having retaken that second position, that is, from Glenn Allen Jr. Running in fourth spot is Mike Miller, the number 18. What a run to the front he has had as we go green with 5 laps remaining in this Buckeye 300.
And Glenn Allen pressuring Brad Loney for the second spot. Loney trying to keep tabs on Mike Eddy. Like to have one more run at him. Closes to within less than half a car length off turn 4.
Mike Eddy has been driving with Brad Loney in the rearview mirror all day long and very successful at it. You don't think he's going to make a mistake? Well, he hasn't made too many in his long career in the American Speed Association. One of the most talented, one of the most resourceful, and, well, we said it before, age and treachery will outdo youth and enthusiasm every time. Well, maybe not every time, but it looks like it's going to happen here today.
People might be shocked to know some of the NASCAR Winston Cup rides that Mike Eddy has turned down, because this is his home. He loves the short tracks. He loves living in Michigan. He can make a lot of money in ASA because he wins a lot of races and a lot of championships. He's as good as they come on a short track, and no doubt about it, he could do it on the super speedways if he chose, but that's not his thing. And Mike gets a tap from Brad Loney, who was pushed by Glenn Allen. White flag, 1 lap to go.
And soon, Mike Eddy will be looking at the flag that he likes to see the most, and that is the black and white checkered flag in the hands of Roger Slack. And it comes out right now. It looks as though the run to the checkers will be completed by Mike Eddy, the number 88 Goodwrench Pontiac, followed by Brad Loney in the 33 machine, the Winnebago Flex Steel machine. Then Glenn Allen Jr. in the number 15 car, the CarQuest Eaglewood Construction Pontiac. And Mike Miller's run from 25th ends in 4th place here at this Buckeye 300. We'll be back with more from the Columbus Motor Speedway. These folks aren't going anywhere. Don't you either. The 1995 AC-Delco Challenge Series on TNN is brought to you in part by Win Oil Company, makers of quality automotive car care products. Remember, when it's wins, it works. By your GM Goodwrench service dealer, we want your business. By Nationwide Auto Parts, the best brands in these parts. And by Schlage Locks, the Doberman of locks. There are the top 10 unofficial results of the Buckeye 300. A terrific afternoon of racing, culminating in yet another victory by the 7-time, maybe soon-to-be 8-time champion. Ralph?
Well, you know, Brian, we all said at the beginning of the show, if you wanted to win the ASA championship, you'd have to go through Mike Eddy, and you laid the gauntlet down again today. Were you surprised by the pressure that came from behind you with Glenn Allen and Brad Loney?
Well, I knew they were there all day, and I was just trying to run fast enough to stay in front and not wear the tires out. We were a little concerned about that all day. And my car would go better the longer the runs went. And when we keep having the yellows, it takes me a while to get going. So I really hated to see them yellows coming there that close to the end.
Is this a sign of things to come from you? Are you ready to go after this 8th championship?
Well, I've always been ready. You know, sometimes you have bad luck, sometimes you have good luck, but I got to believe that this is going to be our year.
Mike Eddy is well on his way, gentlemen.
A lot of candidates for Wynn's winning move. This one had to get it. He had lost second position just one lap before, had Brad Loney, to the guy on the outside of him, that fuchsia car number 15 of Glenn Allen Jr., and he came right back to retake it. Improves by 1, his best ever career finish, and that came in the last race of last season. Brad Loney, the Wynn's winning move, and a second-place finish.
A terrific run and a terrific race behind the 88 car of Mike Eddy, finishing second, Brad Loney third, Glenn Allen Jr., and, of course, I take personal pleasure in Mike Miller's fourth-place finish, coming all the way from 25th. We have had a great time here at Columbus Motor Speedway and the Buckeye 300 presented by Nationwide. And we want to remind you this telecast is a copyrighted production of Group 5 Sports, a division of Group 5 Sales Incorporated. Any use, rebroadcast, or other transmission without the written consent of Group 5 Sports is prohibited. And we are looking down on victory lane. We're going to go once again down to Ralph Shaheen quickly with our runner-up.
Boy, a tremendous run from you today, Brad, and you didn't seem to be fazed at all by having Mike Eddy, the guy that you were racing with. Tell me about that.
I don't know about being phased. These guys are so tough. Mike and Glenn Allen, they're fierce competitors, and we did the best we could and just didn't quite have enough for Mike, but this Winnebago Flex Steel Furniture H&W Motor Express team did a fantastic job, and this team deserves a good finish today, and our sponsors do as well.
Brad Loney ready to go racing in 95.
Our congratulations once again to Mike Eddy for his victory here in the Buckeye 300. You've been watching live ASA Racing on the AC-Delco Series from Columbus Motor Speedway. For Ralph Shaheen and Rob Albright, I'm Brian Drebber. So long until next time.